I'm Hayley Rogers, 41. I stand in my parents' small suburban kitchen, early morning light, coffee steam, the wall clock ticking its thin legal seconds. Arthur Whitaker, Dad's boss, steps through the doorway, raises his hand and says, "Good morning, Colonel." Mom goes pale. Dad chokes on his coffee. The room freezes. I don't. I set a folder on the table. Printed emails, serial numbers, a photo of a damaged guidance unit. I say, "We're going to talk about signatures." Then I say, "At ease," and gesture for Arthur to sit. I do not ask Dad's permission. My polyester badge says security, but it's false. My real badge is locked in a steel footlocker stamped with a silver eagle. Right now, time, silence, and who speaks are under my control. Before I tell you how this kitchen became a courtroom and why my own dad faced handcuffs, tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and hit subscribe with notifications on for more family revenge stories. I see them all. I place a small digital recorder on a placemat and push its red light toward the center of the table. "Date and time," I say, and read them out loud so there's no question later about when this began. I slide a folded copy of the transfer log alongside it and say, "This conversation is being recorded." I put my hands on the table flat as if I'm anchoring the room. I tell Dad to keep his hands visible at all times and tell Mom not to call anyone. I tell Mom to make the coffee if she must move but stay near the living room. Arthur Whitaker, Dad's boss, is here as a cooperating witness. He's agreed to state what he told us in his email. He nods without ceremony. I lay out the topic list: quality assurance approvals, electronic signatures, shipment serials, and plant access logs. I warn Dad plainly. This is voluntary right now, or it will be a formal interview later with witness statements and federal agents. Either way, everything is being documented. I slide the first document across the table. A quality assurance approval with Dad's e-signature and a timestamp that falls on a company holiday. I watch his fingers tighten. I watch Arthur's jaw slump. I say nothing else. The recorder is capturing the silence as much as my words. My cover is a weekday open-to-close mall security shift and the occasional weekend swing, plain enough nobody asks why I patrol a food court. Under that uniform, I carry tradecraft that belies the polyester. In the radio clip on my chest is a lapel camera that records discrete 5-minute loops. My ankle holster holds an encrypted phone that wipes if someone forces it. A key pouch holds a slim set of lock picks I've never had to use outside of training. A pocket notebook contains slimline evidence envelopes I use for collected barcodes and sticky labels. There's a back office at the mall, a storage closet I call a safe room with a bolted laptop dock and a white noise generator that thumps quietly when I need to mask signals. My routine there is surgical. Mirror the loading bay logs at 15 and 45 minutes past the hour so any later edits are obvious, and store hash summaries on a remote server. Myra Shaw, the mall loss prevention supervisor, routes my visits with a vendor-audit excuse that sounds boring. An inventory check, a camera placement review, regular safety sweeps. She keeps dock supervisors distracted while I photograph inbound crate labels and note serial numbers. Major Leela Chen, my handler, monitors my uploaded hash logs and handles mission-level clearance. Special Agent Daniel Ruiz, the federal liaison, watches the legal thresholds and waits for probable cause to harden into warrants. Together, they're my remote chain of command. They can press forward with evidence or hold their fire if the risk to Mom becomes real. The objective is simple in writing and complicated in life. Tie under-spec guidance components back to falsified quality assurance sign-offs that bear Dad's credentials. The legal threshold is higher than a mismatch. We need to show knowing participation, not sloppy paperwork. Pattern matters. A pattern of approvals at odd hours, chat messages that use slang to fast-track a lot, and matching serial numbers from returned defective units. The clock is the enemy. The plant's month-end log purge happens at 2 a.m. on Friday. Their automated backups roll off and overwrite older files. We have until 10:30 a.m. Friday to get a magistrate to sign search warrants and secure the data before it vanishes. Collateral risks sit behind every file. Employee retaliation if Arthur's family is named, doxing threats floating in anonymous forums, and the chance someone at the plant notices the mirroring and wipes a server. My non-negotiables are clean and simple. I will not fabricate evidence. I will not expose Mom to danger. We will preserve chain of custody, each piece of paper photographed, each electronic image hashed, each physical item bagged and labeled with time and location. If that means losing a quick arrest for a clean case, we lose the quick arrest. The next 24 hours are a sequencing problem with human variables. Morning, I'll extract Dad's work phone backup from the laptop he keeps in the den by following the computer's backup files and copying the relevant folder. I'll work inside the safe room so Mom never sees me at the desktop. Midday, I'll meet Myra in a service corridor. She'll stall the dock supervisor while I photograph incoming crate labels and cross-check them against vendor invoices I already have on my encrypted drive. I'll look for mismatched serial numbers and duplicate tags. Afternoon, I'll get Arthur to sign a sworn statement in front of a mobile notary we've pre-checked, and I'll collect his key card logs showing who tapped in and when. I'll ask Arthur who else has his personal identification number and push until he lists names. Evening, I'll sanitize my devices in the safe room, delete temporary files, confirm backups are hashed, and set a controlled delivery for tomorrow morning that contains a tracer within a returned part. I'll prep arrest signal phrases we can use over open channels so field teams know go or abort without alerting plant staff. Contingency plans live in the margins. If Dad tries to flee, I'll call Special Agent Daniel Ruiz, Federal Liaison, who will trigger a soft pickup so we avoid a chase and keep Mom safe. If the plant notices our mirrored pulls, Major Leela Chen, my handler, will amplify legal pressure and seek an emergency administrative freeze. If someone leaks information online, we'll document it, preserve screen captures, and remind ourselves that leaks do not equal evidence in court. For now, the kitchen is a kind of courtroom and the recorder is my gavel. I keep my voice low, my hands visible, and the offer I'm prepared to make written and waiting on the table. Dad used to say, discipline is for men, compliance is for everyone else, and he meant it as both advice and a rule. Mom would repeat it under her breath to keep the peace. That was how she survived. The household language trained me to weigh words. When Dad barked orders, Mom redirected. When he sneered, she softened. I learned to translate contempt into data. I learned to note with a journalist's calm the exact phrasing of an insult, the time it was delivered, the context. That habit looks different on paper than it feels in the moment, but it's what I used later when I had to turn a family dinner into an evidentiary exhibit. My chores weren't rewards, they were proof of worth. Fix the lawnmower without asking for help and you earned a nod. Bring home a trophy and Dad would give 3 minutes of recognition, then shift to criticism about technique. I memorized that cadence. I watched how Mom folded covers away from people's names at the table, how she saved arguments for night when the house was small and the neighbors were far. She taught me survival by repetition. Don't provoke him, keep the holidays intact, never expose a flaw that might be punished publicly. Those lessons were about peace in the short term, but they built a ledger I could read later. The sabotaged nomination feels to me now like the first clear entry in that ledger. I put together the West Point packet like I'd assemble a weapons system, every component in its place, every recommendation letter polished, transcripts collated. I drafted the principal's letter carefully and put the envelope on the hall table to go to school the next morning. That evening, Dad told me he'd take care of it, that he'd ensure it got into the counselor's hands because he knew people. I trusted him the way a recruit trusts a sergeant. He promised. When the acceptance never came, the counselor's emails showed me another story. The guidance counselor's messages were addressed to Hayley and copied to a parent email that listed Dad as handling correspondence. The thread shows Dad stepping in, saying he'd manage the delivery, then a short exchange where the counselor confirms receipt. Later, when I asked, Dad said the principal letter had been misplaced. I searched the house and found nothing. I kept copies of every document anyway, transcripts, recommendation letters, the stamped envelope, because the habit of keeping records had begun as a way to prove to myself that I had tried. The result was I didn't get an appointment. I enlisted instead and found another route to commission. The architecture of that denial stuck with me. It was a learning moment. If someone willful at home can reroute my life with a missing envelope, then in a larger system the same misdirection could cost lives. I kept copies of everything from that point forward. Those first artifacts, typed letters, envelopes, a counselor's digital signature, became my earliest evidence practice. I stored them in a box under my bed, then later in sealed folders in base files. They felt small then, but they taught me discipline. My early service felt like a widening of that ledger into a professional record. I discovered aptitude for languages and systems thinking in training. Patterns appealed to me the way a puzzle does. In field rotations, I gravitated to roles where I could see the whole picture. How data flowed where human error crept in, who benefited when processes were ignored. Cyber work pulled me because it rewarded patience and the ability to read silent things. Metadata, access logs, who had touched a file and when. Counterintelligence taught me the human side, how someone's face tightens when they lie, how they rehearse culpability. A mentor once told me, revenge is messy. Justice is meticulous. I took that as a creed. I learned technical skills on long nights, hashing files, preserving timestamps, mirroring server logs, because I liked that the truth left traces you could compel into court. I also practiced human intelligence tradecraft in cafes and on bus rides, building rapport, eliciting details without asking directly, mapping who touched a document or a crate. The habit that began in my childhood, listen, catalog, wait for leverage, morphed into a method I could use against fraud. I started to map exits and entrances, note who came into a room and who left with what, and always carry a small notebook where I scribbled license plates and loading bay habits. Those notebooks became my maps, then someone I knew paid with their life. SGT, Evan Brooks, a soldier I had served with, died when a guidance unit failed downrange. The memorial program is folded in my wallet still. I take it out sometimes and run my thumb over the crease. After the incident, the post-incident analysis hinted at suspect components that didn't meet specifications. When I saw part numbers that matched catalog entries tied to a plant where my father worked, something that had been a ledger of insults and missing letters became horribly concrete. Grief is not a single emotion. It's an index of obligations. I separated what I felt from what I could prove. I didn't scream at the plant manager. I didn't write angry emails. I compiled charts. I traced serial numbers. I made a technical, unemotional file and added SGT, Brooks' program, into it as a reminder of what was at stake. I promised myself then that if a trail ever led home, I'd follow it to the end. That vow was not made in passion. It was entered into my log like a long-term project with milestones and deadlines. Mom felt the cost of silence every day. She coped by minimizing conflict and repeating Dad's rules back to me as if they were scripture. Don't provoke your father, she'd say, or keep dinners peaceful for the kids. She told the neighbors the family was fine and hung curtains thicker against gossip. When I began to collect evidence at the mall, I stopped sharing operational details with her. I learned to love her without giving her access to the parts of my life that could make her a target. She didn't understand the technical stuff and she didn't need to. Mom needed to keep holidays intact. She needed the emotional scaffolding that let her go to the grocery store without fearing a knock from federal agents. I accepted that. I set boundaries, no discussing the case at the table, no forwarding of documents, no calls to the plant. She obeyed out of habit at first, then out of fear, then finally because she trusted me in a way she hadn't when I was a child asking for a letter to be mailed. The cost was distance. I gained clarity and she gained safety. We both bought it with something we couldn't get back, and we both live with that ledger now. I had assignments that required interagency coordination, working with law enforcement, with other military intelligence elements, and with civilian contractors. Those billets forced me to learn how to speak plainly to different audiences while keeping technical accuracy. My promotion boards looked for a pattern: clear thinking, clean files, and the ability to bring a case to closure. I got promoted because my reports were neat, my evidence files were airtight, and my teams rarely exposed themselves to unnecessary risk. I earned clearances that let me see classified supply records and contractor correspondence, but with those clearances came oversight. My work got audited, my notes were subject to review, and I learned early that transparency inside the chain is as important as secrecy outside it. Fitness reports praised my judgment in difficult situations and my steadiness under pressure. They noted that I kept a level head in hearings and that I produced evidence that stood up to scrutiny. Those lines helped me move into senior positions where the margin for error is smaller and the temptation to cut corners is greater. I learned to build cases others could trust, which is why I'm in the position I am now, sitting at my parents' table with a recorder on a placemat. Promotion didn't make me immune to family politics, but it did teach me to treat every lead like a file you'll have to defend under oath. The skills I use now are a mix of technical tradecraft and everyday interrogation of paper and people. On the technical side, I work with file metadata to prove when a document was created or altered. A timestamp is a fact you can argue with, but you can't change the record without leaving traces. I verify electronic signatures by tracing the signing process and comparing certificate chains and login events to make sure a sign-off happened when and where someone claims. Log anomaly detection is a bread and butter skill. If access spikes at odd hours or approvals happen on company holidays, that pattern speaks louder than any single email. Human intelligence work is the other half. Rapport building, elicitation, and pattern recognition are simple tools used well. I watch how someone repeats a phrase, where their eyes go when they lie, or how they qualify statements to dodge responsibility. I don't interrogate with thunder, I ask small questions that force people to fill silence with truth. Chain of custody is never glamorous, but it's crucial. Every paper I collect is photographed, bagged, labeled, and logged with who handled it and when. Electronic images are hashed so that any later change is obvious. No gaps, no shortcuts. If you lose the chain, you lose the case. Beyond technique, there's tradecraft adapted to civilian terrain. I use rapport the way others use a badge. I practice the art of being unremarkable, watching a person close and note a tick that later becomes the key to a confession. I use simple tricks. Offering coffee, switching topics, asking about mundane logistics. Those moments let me see how someone organizes memory, and memory often betrays intention. Each skill supports the others. A hardware trace gets corroborated by a witness, and a witness gets corroborated by a log. That crosscheck is what turns suspicion into proof. A mall cover works because it folds into the ordinary. A mall is a rhythm of deliveries, food court smells, and indifferent faces. People expect a security guard to look invisible. Push a cart near a loading bay all day and nobody thinks twice about a woman in a polyester vest counting boxes. The loading docks are key. They serve dozens of vendors, they handle crates without fans watching every move, and they have plausible reasons for repeated visits. A vendor audit or a safety check explains why someone keeps coming back to the docks with a clipboard and a camera. Myra Shaw, the mall loss prevention supervisor, makes my presence look like routine. She asks for a log check, I check the labels, and nobody blinks. Foot traffic helps too. A uniform makes you part of the furniture. People avoid engaging with security unless they have to. That creates space to watch patterns without being noticed. Loading schedules are chaotic, trucks back in at all hours, drivers swap paperwork, and crate labels can be obscured under tarps. That chaos is where a sloppy fraud hides. A mall guard with a camera and a vendor excuse can see the hands that handle paperwork, note who signs for what, and photograph serial numbers before a crate gets moved to a truck. There's also deniability. If someone sees me, they assume I'm a temporary nuisance, not an investigator. That lets me speak to dock workers in casual tones and get details that would be guarded if I were wearing a suit and introducing myself as an investigator. The uniform buys me access, the tools buy me proof. Between the two, we build a picture that looks normal to passers-by and ominous in a courtroom. I live by a set of rules that keep the work clean. First, never use family as bait. I will not plant evidence in mom and dad's house to force a confession. I will not invite them into a role that exposes them to criminal liability I don't disclose honestly. Second, record everything I can lawfully record and do it visibly when appropriate. Openness inside the household prevents later claims of secret recordings. The recorder on the table in their kitchen is there for that reason. Third, I will not fabricate or alter evidence. The temptation to tweak a spreadsheet or color a photo is career-ending and morally corrupt. Fourth, minimize harm. If an arrest is necessary, it will be planned to avoid spectacle. I will shield mom from the sight of handcuffs if possible. Fifth, preserve the chain of custody. Every item is bagged, logged, and hashed. If an item moves from one person to another, I write it down, photograph the transfer, and have witnesses sign. Finally, I keep a boundary. I don't make promises I can't keep. If I offer cooperation to Dad, it will be real and recorded with legal counsel present. If I say I'll protect Mom's privacy, I will take steps to do so. Ethics in my world are not sentimental, they're procedural. They make my case defensible and my conscience usable. They also make me predictable, and predictability is a kind of power. The workflow I'm targeting is straightforward when you draw it as boxes and arrows, but messy in real life. Parts arrive at the plant on pallets. They go to an initial inspection where a technician checks visual defects and runs basic tests. If they pass, someone in quality assurance approves them and signs off on a lot number. Those approved parts are then packaged, labeled with serials, and shipped to defense customers. The cheat sits at the approval and packaging stages. It can take different forms. Swapping lots so a substandard batch gets labeled with a passable lot number, reusing approvals from a previous lot without fresh testing, or falsifying test results so that torque, thermal, or alignment readings read as within specification when they're not. The physical swap looks like a worker moving crates around. The document cheat looks like an approval timestamped and signed by a quality assurance account that never visited the test bench that day. Multiple hands touch this process. The receiving clerk logs the crate, a technician performs the test and stamps a sheet. A quality manager reviews the results and signs electronically. A packer labels the serials. A shipping clerk checks the manifest and loads the truck. Each system leaves records, camera feeds in the dock, badge access logs at the quality lab door, electronic sign-off timestamps in the enterprise quality system, and vendor invoices in the shipping system. My work is to connect the dots across those records, match a serial number in a return defect to a form that bears Dad's sign-off, find a badge tap that places a different person at the lab at the same time, and show a pattern of approvals that coincides with bonus periods or fast-track language in internal chats. When you see the whole chain written down, it looks like an ordinary manufacturing flow. When you see the same lot number appear in 3 different contexts with conflicting timestamps, it looks like a trace you can follow. My job is to collect those traces in a way that survives scrutiny, photographs, hashes, statements, and then lock the flow so it can't be edited out at 2 a.m. on the day backups roll over. He's a quality manager. He knows how to read a test bench sheet and how to approve a batch without doing the bench work. He's the person who can say a torque reading is within tolerance with a keystroke. That authority is what makes him exposed. The approvals he signs carry weight. Downstream teams trust them and ship units marked as cleared. When one of those units returns in pieces, the paper trail leads back to him. Pattern is everything. Approvals spike in quarter-close windows when bonuses are calculated, and those spikes line up with internal chatter that uses coded language for fast-tracking work. I've mapped those spikes across several months. I have metadata that shows the approvals were entered from the plant's network but under his credentials. I have a photograph of a shipping label matched to a damaged guidance unit that documents the serial number he approved. I know which screws were mismatched on the part and have lab reports that show they didn't meet spec. That's exposure that a judge will listen to if it's connected cleanly. Dad's defense will be plausible deniability. Someone else used his login, his PIN, his credentials were accessible. That's why I'm building a web of corroboration, badge taps, keycard records, camera frames, and witness statements that make "it wasn't me" into an expensive story to maintain. He can claim he didn't touch the bench, but he can't easily explain why his e-signature lines up with known defective shipments and internal fast-track instructions tied to the same lot numbers. Evidence already in hand reads like a dossier I compiled slowly so it would hold up under pressure. I've got a serial number ladder that ties 3 returned, defective units to parts that left the plant in 2 distinct shipments. Each serial number appears in systems logs that show the same lot number was approved under Dad's account. I have lab results from independent testing that document failure modes matching the damage in field reports. Those reports include photos I pulled from repair logs and military incident files. I also possess screenshots of internal chat where employees use shorthand terms for bypassing tests, phrases that, once decoded, map to the procedural shortcuts we see in the approvals. Arthur Whitaker, Dad's boss, provided a preliminary statement in which he confirms that greenlight is operational shorthand for pushing a lot through on a fast track, and he identified who asked for that push. He's already placed Cassandra Vale, operations executive, as someone above him giving those directives. Arthur's statement is not the final legal piece, but on a table in a kitchen with a recorder blinking, it matters. I have photographs of crate labels from the mall dock, timestamped and matched to vendor invoices. I have a photo of a damaged unit with a matching serial number and a clipboard page showing Dad's approval. I also have phone screenshots where a user with a plant account sends a message about moving product off the line, and the content uses the same coded language. Those screens were captured legally from mirrored pulls and preserved with digital fingerprints so they can't be altered without leaving a record. The sum of these items gives me a bridge from field failure back to the plant and from the plant back to specific approvals. But gaps remain, 3 pieces I must close to turn reasonable suspicion into an airtight case. First, I need a direct message where Dad acknowledges specs are under or concedes the shortcut. An indirect chat is persuasive, but a direct message with his voice or admission is close to irrefutable. Second, I need camera footage showing an actual shipment swap or a parts transfer on the dock within the last 30 days. Photographs of labels are good. A time-stamped video of hands moving parts while paperwork is changed would be better. Third, I need access logs proving who used Arthur's PIN if he claims someone else did. Right now we have suspicions about shared PINs, but a login from an unexpected terminal tied to a name would close that lane. Those gaps are solvable with the tools I have, but not without urgency. The plant purges its month-end records at 2 a.m. Friday. Backups roll off and older snapshots get overwritten as part of their standard operating routine. If I wait, the direct message could disappear, camera storage could recycle, and someone could clean artifacts until the chain is ambiguous. That's why I've scheduled mirrored data pulls and photographic hashes every hour to build a time-stamped shadow copy. But even mirrored copies can become contested if they weren't executed under legal authority. That's where warrants and quick court approval come in. Counter-surveillance in the mall has become a distraction and a danger. I noticed a repeat face yesterday near the dock doors, a man who keeps his distance and times his walks so he nearly always appears when I move to photograph a crate. He fidgets with his jacket, pays attention to the loading schedule, and occasionally glances toward the security office as if trying to measure my patterns. At first I thought it was a vendor or a bored trucker, but patterns reveal tradecraft. I changed my route deliberately and watched him change his route to keep up. The tail is trained, not random. I started collecting low-profile details, the shoes scuffed work boots with a lime green paint fleck on the right toe. His gait, a short, quick stride with a slight favor to the left, a wrist tattoo partially showing between sleeve and cuff with a small black triangle. I photograph those details discreetly from a safe distance, then cross-reference with vendor manifests and delivery driver lists. If he's a contractor, he will eventually register somewhere. If he's not, then he's likely a surveillance asset for someone investigating the plant, or worse, someone hired to protect the fraud. I ran a test. I altered a camera mount schedule so I would be visible at a different hour, then returned to the dock in a plain shirt instead of my uniform. He adjusted within minutes, showing he's watching behavior, not badge color. I took a close-up of his watch face and the timestamp, then moved to the safe room and uploaded the image to my secure folder. Major Leela Chen, my handler, told me not to engage. We don't need a confrontation if the tail is ours to feed into a larger case. My priority is to document and to make sure he doesn't notice the mirrored pulls, because counter-surveillance can trigger a cleanup that kills the evidence chain. The biggest technical threat is the plant's data purge routine. Their systems purge at 2 a.m. Friday without fanfare. It's routine maintenance that every admin relies on. The purge cycles remove older snapshots and rotate backup tapes. If we haven't secured the relevant logs and messages by then, they could be lost or require a complicated and costly restoration with no guarantee. To counter that, I scheduled mirrored pulls every hour and created a digital fingerprint for each file set, what it calls a hash, that proves the file you have now is identical to the file when it was copied. I transmit those fingerprints to Major Leela Chen and Special Agent Daniel Ruiz, Federal Liaison, so they can attest to the integrity of the data if challenged. I've also synchronized physical timestamps with photographic evidence. When I photograph a crate label, I log the time, photograph the shipping manifest, and save the image into the mirrored folder immediately. Every action gets a paper trail and a digital stamp. I briefed my chain, we need a warrant by Thursday night at the latest so the service can freeze the system before the purge. If the judge signs the warrant in time, agents can execute a legal seizure and put an administrative hold on the purge. If we miss that window, we'll have to rely on copies and witness statements, which are weaker. Time is a machine that grinds carefully and relentlessly. The purge is not malevolent, it's a scheduled housekeeping task, but for us it behaves like a deadline. We've built redundancies, mirrors, fingerprints, witness statements, but courts favor original logs and server timestamps. That's why every hour matters, why every photograph is followed by an immediate upload, and why my safe room's white noise generator now hums louder than usual. Dad sends family texts the way other people send memes. Loud, quick, and often. This morning he texted someone, "We might have a problem." I photographed the lock screen and saved it. I don't want Mom to see that kind of message. She doesn't need panic before she has facts. I moved sensitive materials to the safe room and told her I was running errands when she asked why I'd disappeared. She believed it because she wanted to. That willingness is a protection and a liability. Mom will call someone if she thinks I'm in trouble, and any call to the plant could give someone time to wipe servers or move crates. I gave Mom a simple list of what to do if someone phoned. Take their name, say you'll call back, and hand the phone to me. No details, no promises. It felt like teaching a child to cross a street, but these are the everyday rules that keep evidence intact. I also asked her to avoid social media for the next week and to refuse interviews if a reporter shows up. She is frightened of confrontation, so I framed it as a favor. "Keep the house calm for me, Mom." She nodded and pressed her fingers to her mouth like she might take the words in and hold them. The leak risk isn't just emotional, it's procedural. An employee at the plant might call the house out of concern and, in doing so, trigger a chain reaction. I briefed my team that any unwanted contact to the household must be recorded and reported. We stage-proofed the living spaces, no documents on open tables, no devices logged into work accounts, and a locked drawer for anything that could be seized. Those precautions are small and domestic, but they keep the big things from collapsing. I keep one thought on repeat: protect mom's routine, because maintaining her normal life keeps the investigation lawful and crisp. I wrote the deal for Dad in plain language and printed it on a single sheet so nothing could be lost in legalese. The offer was limited immunity for cooperation targeted specifically at Cassandra Vale, operations executive, the person above him in the chain who issued and encouraged the fast-track behavior. The conditions were clear: full and truthful statements, surrender of his work devices, consent to a residence search for the current period under review, and immediate access to his work accounts and passwords. In exchange, I promised the prosecution would consider a reduced charge profile if his cooperation produced admissible evidence against higher-ups. I put a deadline on it: no open-ended bargaining, because deadlines focus decisions. I had counsel draft the exact wording so it would hold in court and so I could read it verbatim. I didn't want a translation dispute later about what limited immunity meant. There's no blanket pardon in it. It's a conditional offer designed to move the case up the ladder without letting culpability evaporate. I know how these deals look on paper: they're cold, contractual, and meant to force a choice. I also wrote in protections for Mom: no public naming without consultation, a protective processing request if the household needs it, and a clause that any contact with Arthur or Cassandra by Dad has to be disclosed immediately. I will read the offer in the kitchen, on the record, with Arthur present and the recorder visible. I will say slowly and plainly what each clause means and then slide the pen across the table. I don't want to trap Dad into signing something he doesn't understand, but I also don't want ambiguity. The offer is both a lifeline and a lever. It offers Dad a path to mitigate his exposure if he uses it to take down Cassandra. It also tests whether he values family stability more than his freedom or vice versa. We rehearsed the takedown until the script was muscle memory. Code phrases were simple and crisp. Green receipt meant go. Blue receipt meant abort. No one used names on the air. Myra Shaw, the mall loss prevention supervisor, would handle the docs, stall the floor supervisor politely, request a barcode audit, and produce a maintenance excuse if anyone asked. Special Agent Daniel Ruiz would handle arrests and coordinate the warrants. Major Leela Chen would manage comms and make sure legal counsel was ready. I assigned myself to the controlled delivery and the plant entry point where I'd photograph serial numbers and secure a crate. We practiced the logistics in the safe room. I ran through the sequence aloud: secure the crate, verify the tracer, photograph the lid, record the manifest, transmit the hash to the vault. We drilled the arrest scene mentally. Ruiz leads, Leela secures the room, I stay inside to keep Mom calm if the arrest happens at the house, and Myra keeps the doc auditable. We planned contingencies for a fleeing suspect. Ruiz's team had a non-confrontational takedown script and an offer for immediate protective custody if someone turned on us. We also rehearsed the human parts. I practiced reading the cooperation terms slowly so Dad could hear each phrase. I practiced the pause after I slid the pen, letting the silence do the work. I practiced walking Mom to the living room afterward, speaking softly and keeping her from seeing handcuffs if they were used. There's no virtue in spectacle. We train to be efficient, humane, and precise because those qualities make evidence less likely to be contested later. When I come back to the kitchen, I bring evidence in a neat stack because neatness is part of the argument. The first sheet I set down is Arthur's preliminary statement. The second is a printed chain of email highlighted at key phrases. The third is a sheet showing the serial number ladder matched to a field failure report. There's a color photo of a damaged guidance unit with the serial number visible, taken under daylight and labeled. I also bring a printed copy of the cooperation offer with the legal boilerplate removed and the conditions stated simply so Dad can't claim confusion. The recorder sits in plain sight on a placemat. I turn it on in front of everyone and announce the date and time. I do this because I will not hide recording from Mom or Dad. Lawful evidence is visible evidence. I place a small paper evidence envelope with a photographed barcode on the table, showing a chain of custody sticker already attached. I slide a photograph of a crate label taken at the mall dock under a clear plastic sleeve so the image can't be smudged. Everything is tactile. I don't pile documents, I arrange them so each item is a page you can turn. The visual order matters in a family kitchen because it makes the abstract feel real. Arthur confirms things I half expected and half feared. He explains calmly that green light or green is the term used on the floor to mean push a lot through without the full set of bench tests, fast track in operational language. He says he used the term and he says others above him used it too. He tells me Cassandra Vale, operations executive, is the one who gave the directive on several calls and emails he later copied me on. He looks at Dad and says plainly that Dad knew the parts were under spec and signed anyway. Arthur's voice is even, there's no dramatics. That evenness makes the admission colder, more useful. He goes through an example. A morning when a delivery came in during a quarter close, Cassandra called to ask for a push because a contractor deadline was breathing down procurement. Arthur says he relayed the request down the line and Dad, as quality manager, signed off on the approval. Arthur tells me he didn't have the authority to override Cassandra and that he felt pressure to keep orders flowing. He admits his role as a facilitator and points to where responsibility concentrated upward at Cassandra's desk. Arthur's confirmation is the hinge. He won't be the prosecution's star, but his statement ties the operational shorthand to decisions from above. He names dates, references emails, and identifies participants. He says Dad's approvals weren't clerical mistakes, they were part of a pattern where speed beat thoroughness. He looks at Dad, then at me, and says quietly, she deserved the rank she earned. It's a small apology he didn't know he needed to give until this moment, and it lands in the kitchen like a dropped plate. Sharp, irreversible, and changing how the room holds itself. Dad moves through the old stages, denial, indignation, the bargaining that smells like old habits. He asks if this is a threat. He pleads that he was only doing his job, that production had to move. I let him speak. I let the silence do some of the work. When a man has spent a life minimizing his culpability, words become a thin defense. He cycles to anger. He shouts about loyalty, about coworkers being implicated. He tries to pull Mom into it by saying the whole family will be ruined. Mom starts to cry and begs me to stop. I don't stop. I put my hand on the pen like an anchor. You can sign, I say, and we'll bring Cassandra into this with your help. You can refuse and the warrant process begins and you will be arrested under the evidence already developed. I state the deadline. You have until 12 noon. After that, I call Special Agent Daniel Ruiz. The clock on the wall becomes a metal presence between us. Dad pleads for more time. He promises to call a lawyer and negotiate an internal thing. I tell him the offer is time-boxed because decisions made under delay become liabilities for others. Arthur clears his throat and says it again. The pattern is real, and cooperation now is the only way to make the story point up the chain. Mom repeats, "Please, Tom," and folds into herself. He looks at the pen, at the recorder, at me, as if the house has telescoped into a courtroom. He has to choose between a path that can help him keep some dignity and a path that will let the legal system decide. The pause stretches, I let it stretch. By late morning, we move into execution mode. Special Agent Daniel Ruiz, federal liaison, files the necessary warrants using Arthur's preliminary statement and the mirrored data hashes as probable cause. He lays out device, premises, and cloud warrants drafted to be narrow but effective. Devices for the period under review, the plant premises where the records are maintained, and cloud storage where vendor backups live. He coordinates with Major Leela Chen, my handler, who confirms judge availability and the window for service. Leela has already bench-checked a magistrate who understands industrial purges and granted a tentative emergency time slot if the evidence warrants it. We brief a judge with a concise affidavit that ties the pattern of approvals to returned defective units, links Dad's e-signature to suspicious timestamps, and includes Arthur's statement about greenlight requests. The affidavit reproduces the mirrored hash summaries so the magistrate can see the digital fingerprint of what we've preserved. Ruiz moves fast, but legally, there's no improvisation. He confirms chain of custody procedures in the affidavit and lists the items we intend to seize so the warrant language is tight. Specific server directories, specific workstations, badge logs, and the internal chat archives with date ranges. We assign roles before the warrants are signed: who serves the plant premises warrant, who will take custody of electronic devices, who will photograph physical evidence. We make sure every planned seizure has at least 2 witnesses and a protocol for immediate hashing and write-blocked imaging. Warrant service timing is critical because of the purge. We coordinate with local prosecutors to have deputies and federal agents on standby to execute at the hour the judge signs. Everyone knows their lane. Ruiz will handle custody and arrests. Leela will coordinate evidence handling and continuity. I will manage evidentiary photography and cataloging inside the plant. And Myra will secure the mall dock for the controlled delivery. The legal cover is tight and the paperwork is deliberate, an iron frame around a fragile truth. At the mall, we run the controlled delivery like a drill. We stage a return shipment that looks routine. A crate with an old part from a vendor who cooperates under subpoena. We've embedded a tracer in the crate that will report when the seal is broken and where the package moves next. Myra Shaw, the mall loss prevention supervisor, coordinates with our delivery driver and keeps dock supervisors engaged with a maintenance excuse. She is the kind of ally who can stall politely for 15 minutes and never raise suspicion. I watch from a safe shadow as the carrier backs into the dock. Myra requests a manifest audit in a casual voice, then distracts the floor supervisor by asking about an unrelated safety checklist. While she stalls, I move in with a camera and photograph the crate label, the seal number, and the vendor manifest. The tracer reports the crate's location to our secure vault as soon as it's logged, and I transmit a hash of the photograph to the evidence server. The floor supervisor grows uneasy but accepts Myra's authority. She's experienced and calm. We execute the swap on schedule. A worker who thinks he's returning a different part opens a neighboring crate and moves a set of labeled items into ours. I capture the hands on camera, the motion of swapping, and the moment the wrong serials are placed inside. The tracer pings when the seal is disturbed. We seal the crate again, label it with a new custody number, and log the serial numbers in the manifest. The crate is then moved to a holding bay with a chain of custody sticker visibly attached. I photograph each sticker, then transmit the hashes to Major Leela Chen and Special Agent Daniel Ruiz, Federal Liaison, so they are synchronized with what we will present in court. Plant entry is deliberate and controlled. Agents arrive with warrants in hand and write blockers ready. The first thing we do is prevent any remote wipes. Leela's team places a physical hold on the plant network segment to stop syncs and block external access. Then technicians with write-blocking devices copy servers in place so we never change original data. I stand by while an agent images Dad's workstation with a forensic tool that creates a bit-by-bit copy under a write blocker. Every seizure is photographed, labeled, and logged. We pull badge logs and match them against the approval timestamps we already have. We capture door access events, terminal logins, and any unusual remote sessions. We secure the fast-track chat archive by exporting the conversation threads and hashing them in front of witnesses. An analyst decodes shorthand in a controlled environment and documents the mappings from slang to procedural shortcuts. We collect emails, archived attachments, and server logs that show when someone used a particular certificate to sign off on a test. All devices are bagged and sealed, and I photograph each transfer to a chain of custody form. We store the original images and the forensic copies in separate, secure evidence vaults so the defense cannot claim tampering. Cornering Cassandra Vale, operations executive, happens because she arrives to fix the sudden slowdown with the plant already in chaos. She walks into a conference room expecting a routine meeting and finds Special Agent Daniel Ruiz waiting with a copy of the warrant. I stand near the door with Major Leela Chen and two agents. I take her devices and place them on the table while Ruiz reads the charges aloud. Cassandra is composed at first. Executives are trained to be calm under pressure. She asks for counsel, which is her right, and we respect that. She reaches for her laptop, then hesitates. Leela has already secured remote access, so any attempt at a wipe is blocked at the network edge. I take the laptop and phone from her hands and place them on a forensics mat. Ruiz tells her she's under investigation for conspiracy to defraud and for actions that put service members at risk. Cassandra tries a standard line: blame the facilitation layers, blame Arthur, say she never saw the final approvals. She attempts to shift liability down. We show her the tracer footage from the controlled delivery and the photograph of a damaged unit with a serial number tied to her directives. We lay out Arthur's confirmed statement that green light meant push and that Cassandra had asked for pushes at key times. For the first time, she loses her evenness. She starts to implicate a procurement urgency and the pressure from above to meet delivery commitments. She looks at the images and realizes the net is tighter than she expected. Ruiz places a form for voluntary interview in front of her, and Leela stands ready to coordinate legal counsel and preserve the integrity of every next step. I keep my voice steady and remind him of the facts we have on the table: serial numbers, timestamps, Arthur's statement about green light, the tracer footage. I tell him plainly that the offer is conditional and limited, written by counsel so it holds in court. Sign, and prosecutors will consider a reduced charge profile if his cooperation is truthful and produces admissible evidence against Cassandra Vale, operations executive. Refuse and the warrants get served and an arrest follows on existing probable cause. I say it without flourish because the truth is enough. He thinks about his life in small increments: the shop banter, the holidays, the small privileges that built years of routine. He pictures himself led out in handcuffs. He imagines mom bruised by gossip. Those things matter to him. He also knows at some level that a refusal might not be brave. It might be the only honest choice that keeps him from lying under oath later. The pen leaves a wet trail when he signs, and the sound it makes on the paper is what a gavel might sound like in a family room. He signs with a shaking hand. When the signature is wet, I make the call. I tell Special Agent Daniel Ruiz, Federal Liaison, that Dad has signed and is willing to cooperate. Ruiz moves quickly but carefully. He arranges a soft pickup, not a dramatic roundup. The agents come in plain clothes so Mom will not see the uniformed spectacle. Arthur, Dad's boss, is escorted in as the cooperating witness. He will be taken to a secure room to give a formal statement and then be released to assist the case. Cassandra Vale, operations executive, is already being detained at the plant. I go through my checklist, confirming that each piece of evidence is logged, hashed, and photographed. Chain of custody forms are filled in, each signature a small, dull bead on a long thread. The agents are professional and humane. Ruiz explains to Dad what will happen next: processing, protective measures if needed, and the opportunity to provide full disclosure in a formal setting. They offer Dad the option of speaking with counsel before a recorded proffer session. I stay in the kitchen and walk Mom to the living room, telling her quietly that I'll be with her and that nothing more will happen in the house unless it's absolutely necessary. I give her a glass of water and sit across from her because the kitchen table now feels like an evidence table, and I want to be the bridge between procedure and family. Cassandra and a few others are transported in unmarked vehicles to federal custody with minimal fuss. Arthur is taken to a safe room for his statements and then released as a cooperating witness under protective agreement. Dad goes to a neutral processing center where his devices will be imaged and where prosecutors will decide how to proceed with his cooperation. Ruiz coordinates transport so there are no images of cuffs on the evening news of our neighborhood. I am intent on preventing Mom from seeing anything that would break her in a way she cannot recover from. When the cars leave, the house is quieter. The sound of the engine fade is a small, physical hollowing. We process evidence with methodical slowness. Each item seized at the plant or in transit is cataloged, photographed, and sealed. Agents initial bags, date them, and place tamper-evident seals on boxes. We label everything with exhibit numbers that map to the affidavit. The crate from the mall is logged as Exhibit 12, the photograph of the damaged guidance unit is Exhibit 7, Arthur's sign statement is Exhibit 3, and so on. That mapping is a language. Once you know the words, you can speak to judges in a way that resists elegant defense narratives. Debriefs and recorded statements follow standard practice. Dad sits in a neutral room with counsel present. Ruiz advises him of his rights and explains the difference between a proffer session, where statements are admissible under certain conditions if he is truthful, and a sworn statement which carries heavier penalties for falsehood. I provide each exhibit number to Dad in sequence and ask him to confirm whether he recognizes the item and whether he can explain the context. He answers haltingly at first, then more clearly as he remembers small administrative details. We pin down the dates and times that match the server logs and badge taps. Arthur's interview is cleaner. He's steadier now that he has accepted cooperation. He walks through specific calls and emails where Cassandra asked for pushes. He identifies who was on those calls and where orders originated. Those details let Ruiz draft focused questions for Cassandra's interview. Major Leela Chen, my handler, sits in and takes notes, verifying that timestamps align with what we mirrored before the purge. She confirms live that our hashes match originals and that every forensic image has a right blocker trail. The debriefs are long and bureaucratic, but they're where truth becomes testimony. Immediate fallout arrives in waves. Plant operations are paused pending a federal audit and an internal safety hold. Production floors clear. Employees are escorted through checkout with HR present. The company posts a short, measured statement about a temporary operational pause due to regulatory review, which is legal minimal but accurate. News outlets sniff the story and some write with less restraint. I do not comment publicly. I do not grant interviews. I sign the official reports and attest under penalty of perjury that the exhibits and logs I present are true copies of what I observed. Within hours, social media picks at fragments. A conservative blog posts a blurred photo of the plant exterior, a local news anchor speculates, and coworkers text Mom asking whether Tom is okay. I shield her from the worst of it by screening calls and printing out a short, calm note that explains that an investigation is underway and that we are cooperating. The plant's stock takes a public hit. Procurement freezes on new contracts until audits clear. That has consequences for employees and contractors who are not involved in wrongdoing, and I feel that weight. This is not about vengeance for me. It's about accountability, and accountability makes ripples that reach innocent lives too. At night, after the official forms are filed and the evidence vault doors are bolted, I go back to the living room with Mom. She watches me with a face narrowed and raw like a map with a coastline erased. I sit beside her and tell her what happened in plain language, leaving out procedural details that would only worry her. I say that Dad cooperated, that Cassandra is being held for questioning, and that Arthur provided a statement. I tell her everything I can share without compromising the case. I do not promise her a neat ending because I can't. I tell her I won't be moving back into their house, that I will remain involved in the case only in my official capacity, and that for her safety and the integrity of the investigation, she must not call the plant or contact coworkers. I set a boundary: no outreach to any person involved in the work chain until prosecutors advise otherwise. She nods slowly, the way someone learns rules by repetition, and asks if Dad will be okay. I say the truth I can afford. He's cooperating, which gives him the best chance to limit legal exposure, but he will still face consequences. She asks whether I want anything for her to be angry, to be reconciled. I tell her I want her safe and that I want the truth to be known in a way that honors the life lost, which is the thread that started all this. She presses my hand and says haltingly that she is sorry not for herself but for what she didn't see. I let her say it and do not correct her. Apologies are messy and sometimes meaningless, but this one is part of the ledger we keep. We agree on practical things. She will give any calls to me, she will not post on social media, and she will let the legal team handle interviews. When I leave that night, the house smells like coffee gone cold and dish soap. The kitchen table keeps its placemat and the recorder sits like a small, watchful device. I walk outside into ordinary air and let the weight of the day settle into something that feels less like victory and more like work finally done. The case will move through slow courts and quieter rooms. Consequences will unfold in hearings and deposition transcripts. The most personal threads have been cut or, at least, gathered and cataloged. In the quiet, Mom's breathing slow, and I realize the thing I wanted most wasn't to punish my father but to see the ledger balanced so someone else's child didn't die because paperwork was casual. People who haven't lost someone to failed parts don't understand how small things carry a life's weight. A bolt out of spec is an abstraction until a boy from small-town America doesn't come home. Then the bolt becomes a moral question. At the memorial, I place the program back in my wallet and I touch the crease with my thumb like it's an index card that marks where purpose began. I talk to him there because rituals need witnesses. I tell him I did what I could. The words are not for him, they're a promise I make into the quiet. When I dig through files in the weeks that follow, I sometimes catch myself tracing the serial number on a photo and thinking of his hand, the way a soldier's handshake is a declaration. Responsibility is what I wanted to see carried forward, a ledger not of vengeance but of who answers when a schedule and a shortcut kills. The memorial is a place I go back to when paperwork feels like argument instead of act. I read his name and remind myself of the human side of every exhibit number. That memory keeps the work honest. It's the reason I refuse to let the case become spectacle or a family vendetta. The ledger had to be balanced by procedure, not by private satisfaction. After the arrests and the court filings, the house is different. I don't move back in and I don't try to fix the past with speeches or reconciliations. What I am now is a person who has chosen a line and walked it. I am still a colonel in the army who understands command, responsibility, and the slow arithmetic of evidence. I am also a daughter who can no longer trust some of the small private truths I once assumed were solid. That split is permanent and practical. I call it setting boundaries. Those boundaries look like decisions I make every morning. I eat meals alone more often. I sleep when I can, not when other people think I should. I stopped waiting for Dad's approval years ago. Now I stopped waiting for Mom's relief or forgiveness. I stopped measuring my worth by other people's opinions and started measuring it by whether I could present a clean file in court. The cost is distance. Holidays are less crowded, conversations are shorter, and some family memories are filed like exhibits rather than stories to share. The gain is clarity. I can speak my truth without it turning into a battle for validation. Professionally, I am steadier. I know the price of procedural patience and the ethics of not overreaching. Personally, I've learned to make room for ordinary things, a dinner that's not an interrogation, a walk without watching for tails, a coffee that isn't timed between uploads. I don't expect a medal for that, I expect sleep. I expect to live without apologizing for following through. That is who I am after this. Someone who keeps lists and keeps promises, who chooses responsibility over quiet complicity. Weeks later, I find myself in a small suburban grocery store on a Wednesday evening beneath humming fluorescent lights, tired and ordinary. I buy a cup of coffee that is too hot and a simple sandwich wrapped in wax paper. There's a woman at the register who asks whether I want a bag, and I say yes because I like the small courtesy. I tuck the folded program back into my wallet by habit and check my pockets for my keys the way a person checks for a familiar weight. No uniform, no folder, just a jacket and a wallet and a quiet sense of being allowed to be small for a moment. I pass a mall security guard on break outside the food court without fanfare. He is young and nervous, rubbing his palms in the way of people waiting for details. We nod at each other because that is the simplest acknowledgement two people who understand control can give. The air outside the store smells like rain and asphalt, ordinary air tastes like permission. I walk out and feel each step as an ordinary one. I let the evening carry me without strategy or checklist. For a few blocks, the world does not require me to account for anyone else's secrets. Thank you for staying with this story. If you listened this far, please tell me where you heard it in the comments and which moment hit you hardest. I read them all. If you haven't yet, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next first-person story about family, duty, and consequences. I promise the stories I tell here are precise, lawful, and grounded in the kinds of choices that make justice possible without cruelty. If you liked the way this one landed, tell a friend who likes methodical, character-driven narratives. If you disliked it, tell me why. I can take critique. Leave a note about your listening setup and whether you prefer full audio readings or short excerpts. Those little signals help me shape future episodes. I'm committed to bringing real, human voices to complicated situations and to doing so in a way that respects consequences for people both guilty and innocent. Finally, remember this: patience is not the same as passivity. Doing the hard, slow work matters. Subscribe, ring the bell, and come back for the next story. I'll be here with a neat folder and a voice that tells it plain.